Good morning, all of you. Welcome back to the channel. And we're starting with the today's analysis session for 5th of July, 2023. So the first article is talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It calls for multipolar world order as Iran joins the grouping. So that's an important development and indicating a lack of consensus. India stays out of statements on economic cooperation. So we need to know clearly about what has been India's stand when it comes to the issue of or the topic of economic cooperation, why we have stayed out of the statements on this thing, and also on China's Belt and Road Initiative owing to the projects in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So SEO calls for cooperation on digital payments and countering radicalization. And the basic things they need to be clear that what is the focus area of SEO, what are the other member countries, when did India join it, the headquarters. So that is the basic thing. You need to know about the geography of different member countries also. So Prime Minister says that some countries they use terrorism as an instrument of their policies. They provide shelter to terrorists. So SEO, it should not hesitate to criticize such nations, and there should be no place for double standards on such serious matters. So that's there, and these are the emerging areas of development like digital payments and countering radicalization and economic cooperation from which India has stayed away. So the host was India, and so the member countries, it now includes China, India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. So these are the all member countries of SEO. And then some other initiatives, important initiatives of SEO that are also important for us to know. And so in reference to the sanctions on Russia and Iran, SEO members, they jointly criticized the non-UN sanctions as incompatible with the principles of international law, which have a negative impact on other countries. So they also agreed to explore the use of national currencies for the payments within the grouping, which would circumvent the international dollar-based payments. So this is also an important emerging area where countries they are trying to internationalize their own domestic currencies, or they are trying to shift away from highly being dependent upon the usage of US dollar when it comes to the payment mechanisms. So that's there. Moving forward. So in the Supreme Court, Uddhav Camp says that Speaker is delaying the disqualification process. So here, the disqualification thing, which schedule talks about it, what are the other important constitutional articles which talks about the procedure, the powers of the Speaker in this context, and important Supreme Court judgments on this. So here, Shiv Sena's petition says that it's imperative for this court to direct the Speaker to decide the disqualification petitions expeditiously. So Green Tribunal, that is NGT, it orders SOP to curb pollution at hospitals. So NGT, it has constituted a 5-member committee, which is headed by the Secretary of the Union Ministry of Health, to form a standard operating procedure for environmental management inside and around all the government district hospitals and hospitals larger than such district hospitals, including the medical colleges, within 3 months. So that is another area which needs to be tackled when we talk about the pollution and its impact. So hospitals and how pollution, it is basically, obviously hygiene, all of that is very important. So that is going to be one target area, and a specific committee has been constituted by NGT on that. So you need to know about the basic details about NGT firstly. when was it constituted, what is the nature of the body, and likewise. So pay tribute to Alluri Sitaram Raju by imbibing his values, says the president. So the message to be drawn from the life of the tribal warrior is to work selflessly and fearlessly for the well-being of the deprived sections of society. His struggle against injustice is a proud chapter in India's freedom struggle. So the personality becomes very important, and all the basically the tribal revolts, you need to know about them, their chronology, and what were the results. So he is being remembered as a tribal warrior, and it is his true identity. So he kept fighting for the rights of the tribal society till his martyrdom, and working selflessly and fearlessly for the well-being of the deprived sections of the society is something which we can take away from his life. So he is an example of uniting the society without any discrimination based on caste and class. So a macro view of the fiscal health of states. So in India, the states, they mobilize altogether more than a third of the total revenue, which is spent, and they spend 60% of the combined government expenditure, and they have a share in the government borrowing that is around 40%. So that is the basic data. So given the size of the fiscal operation of the states and up-to-date understanding of their finances, that is critical in order to draw the evidence-based inferences on the fiscal situation of the country. So in short, an analysis of the emerging fiscal situation of the states by examining key data on state finances from individual state budgets for 2023-24. So fiscal imbalances and the consolidation is the focus. So fiscal imbalance, obviously there exists that. So when we talk about the, horizontal and the vertical devolution of funds or the balance. So that is one area to understand. So here we have the data that at the union level, the fiscal deficit declined from 9% of the GDP in 2020 to 5.9%. And all the state fiscal deficit was 4% of the GDP in 2020. It declined to 3.24% of the GDP in 2022. So this sharp reduction in the fiscal deficit suggests that we cannot have an impressionistic view of the fiscal situation of the country, especially on the finances of the state. So due to the absence of aggregation of individual state budget data, consolidated with the general government finances is not readily available right now. So every year this data, it becomes available only after the publication of the RBI's annual study on the state finances. So that is an important source of data. So the timeline of this publication by RBI, it is during the second half of the fiscal year. So right now, the analysis done in this article, it is based on the data which is collated from the individual budgets of 17 major states, and these states are responsible for more than 90% of the all combined spending of all the states. So comprehensive revenue deficit reduction framework, that is essential to improve the fiscal health of these states. So when we talk about the revenue deficit, and like you need to be very, very clear about the capital expenditure, revenue expenditure, what are the sources of capital receipts and revenue receipts, then fiscal deficit, how that is different from the revenue deficit, and why it is important to reduce revenue deficit, why it is important to rationalize the revenue expenditures. So all of these nuances, they are very important. So the first important thing when we talk about the fiscal consolidation at the state level is that we need to work upon reducing the revenue deficit. So that is going to be an important area. So there are fiscal challenges that exist, like there are significant fiscal challenges that need correction in the short to the medium time frame. So the most critical being the containing of the revenue deficit of the states. So that's there. And it is true that the mere presence of a revenue deficit, it cannot be considered as a sign of the fiscal profligacy. So mere presence wouldn't be a sign of that. And it is also true that pressure on the revenue expenditure, it was high during COVID-19 time. So that was also one area which led to the expansion of revenue deficit. So increasing revenue deficit driving the fiscal imbalance, it has long run fiscal implications, and there's a need to correct this imbalance in the revenue account. So that is going to be the one focus area. And Apart from this framework, we need to have a proper framework, a proper plan of action in order to contain down the revenue deficit and ensure fiscal consolidation at the state level. And that would be obviously ensuring the macro level economic and the fiscal stability. So if we examine the data from the last 20 years, the revenue deficit, it had almost disappeared from the state budgets before COVID-19. And after COVID-19, we know that the revenue expenditure, they expanded, and that's how again we can say that this problem it re-emerged when we're talking about the growing revenue deficits. So the re-emergence of the revenue deficit in the recent years, it should take the focus back on the management of the revenue deficit by creating an incentive compatible framework. So few measures they have been mentioned here, like going forward, we can think about the interest-free loans to the states by the union government. If continued, they may be linked to a reduction in the revenue deficit. So this will help eliminate the possibility of a substitution of the state's own capital spending, and it will also prevent the diversion of the borrowed resources to finance revenue expenditure. So here, interest-free loans to the states by the union government can play a very critical role. So a defined time path for the revenue deficit reduction with a credible fiscal adjustment plan, it would help restore the fiscal balance and improve the quality of expenditure also. So forward-looking performance incentive grants, it could also be considered for a reduction of revenue deficit. So in this context, different approaches provided by the early finance commission. So recommendations of finance commission, that becomes important. And in conclusion, we need to get the focus back to the management of the revenue deficit. For this, a macro view is essential. So antibiotics with promise, that is a lifeline India awaits. So in the relentless battle against the highly drug-resistant infections, a team of doctors recently witnessed a glimmer of hope amid the challenges they face. So their extraordinary efforts and the lives they saved highlight the critical need for action. So this is not just a story, it's an earnest plea for the emergency use authorization for essential antibiotics that can make a profound difference between life and death. So that's an in India innovation. So in their quest for a lifeline, the doctors they turned to a promising antibiotic. That is, this is the name of the antibiotic. So it was developed by the Indian researchers. This antibiotic combines two active components to combat the drug-resistant gram-negative pathogens. And while still undergoing phase 3 trials internationally, this Indian innovation it has shown remarkable potential. So we are basically, obviously, we are having new innovations. We are developing new medicines, antibiotics specifically in the pharmaceutical sector. So emergency use authorization for the essential antibiotics. These are like as two examples, they show they can make a profound difference between life and death. So here are two examples I've mentioned as case studies. So there's a dire situation to, allow for the emergency use authorization for these. So that's there. We're not having like it is too specific in articles, so that's why I'm not going into much detail. But you can find out about this emergency use authorization. Is it available for few antibiotics right now or not? And what are the criteria? So that can be found out about. So the irrevocable connection between anemia and maternal health. So a study conducted on the anemic pregnant women of low and the middle income countries has found that there's a strong link between anemia and the postpartum hemorrhage, with a risk of death or near miss very high. So here that is the case according to a study, and in India, the data on which we rely is the National Family Health Survey. So of late, anemia it has been in news in India also. And what with the government proposing to remove a question on it from the NFHs and instead do a more elaborate test to determine the hemoglobin levels in the blood as part of the diet and the biomarker survey. So that's there. And so talking about the linkage between anemia and the pregnancy, so it is a very strong link with the postpartum hemorrhage. There is excessive vaginal bleeding after delivery, and the risk of death or near miss is very high. So as per a study by the woman, that is the World Maternal Antifibrinolytic two trial collaborators worldwide, more than half of the billion women of the reproductive age, they are anemic. So that is the one challenge that we need to deal with. We need to basically improve the situation, the nutritional health and specifically focus upon increasing the hemoglobin levels in women. So while known risk of the anemia or the low hemoglobin levels is a postpartum death, the researchers that decided to examine in the detail the association between anemia and the risk of this. So that's there. So we do have a policy to tackle anemia also. So you can find out about its like basic provisions. That would be an important thing. And that's already been asked in the examination. So government is going to help combat the child trafficking in border areas and set up the rehabilitation homes. So obviously the policy is going to be different for the border areas and other areas. So these homes, they will provide shelter, food, clothing, counseling, and other daily needs for the victims. So that's going to be the thing and center. It is decided to help build infrastructure in border areas to combat the child trafficking and help in rehabilitation and protection of the victims. So this initiative is a part of the Women and Child Development Ministry, will provide the financial assistance to the states and UTs. And that's so basic services and needs, they would be fulfilled by the government. So we see that India is a source as well as destination country for the human trafficking, and the main source countries, they includes Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, from where women and girls, they are trafficked in the lure of better life, jobs, good living conditions on this side, basically in India. So these are some false promises on the basis of which human trafficking is carried out. So then you need to know about Mission Vatsalya scheme, its guidelines. That's going to be an important thing. Coming to the world page, so here we see so we are seeing that the relations between Egypt and Turkey, they're also getting normalized. So for the first time in a decade, Egypt and Turkey, they appoint the envoys. So Central Asian region, that's very, very important given the geopolitical situation and how things are changing between the Central Asian economies, and then obviously because of the Russia-Ukraine war also. So the battle in Sudan, it rages further. We are seeing that still the things they're worsening. So here, even from the perspective of refugees, this area, this is important. And obviously the topic of refugees becomes important. Apart from this, the geography of this region, Sudan, and the important rivers and the lakes, if specifically the ones which are drying up because of climate change. So that's an important topic. So we see that in Afghanistan, women's freedom that is being compromised. So women's saloons, they are also going to be shut down. So women's freedom, their liberty, that is basically being suppressed by the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. And even UN has spoken on this. So obviously that is not being supported given the 21st century world. On the one side, we are seeing how women's rights, they are being suppressed in Afghanistan. So this is obviously, this amounts to violation of their human rights as well. So they are being like banned from parks, fun fairs, and gyms and ordered them to cover up in public. So they've almost been barred from working for the United Nations or the NGOs also. So we are seeing Maharashtra's inequality is widening. So food cost, it has crossed 40% of the urban households monthly spends in 2017-18. First time in 18 years, and household consumption expenditure survey was recently carried out. So we are having the data and analyzing it on that basis. So food cost widen the gap. So food bill for Maharashtra's rural households shot up to almost 49% of the total spending. Rural households' average monthly spends were just 45% of rupees 4,400 odd spent by the average households in the 2017-19 period. So food share of the total expenditure crossed 60% of the poorest 5% of the household. So you can imagine the impact specifically on the poorest households. Coming to the main newspaper, so here what explains the resilience of the Indian manufacturing. So let's understand all those factors. So what is the state of global manufacturing? So here at a time when most large economies, they are struggling, India's PMI was at 57.8 in June, which is slightly lower than 58.7 during the month of May. So what are the factors which are helping the India's manufacturing sector? And here you can also see the comparison of different economies and their respective manufacturing sectors. So you can see that how like basically Indian sector is performing, and then UK. So this dotted red line, it is the PMI above 50, it indicates growth, and below 50 indicates contraction. So it is India, which is, you can see, sufficiently above the 50 level and 50 level mark, and you can see China is just barely, it is able to touch 51. And apart from that, US, Eurozone, and UK, you can see all are them below 50. So it is indicating that yes, slowdown is impacting these advanced economies. But for us, it is important to understand what are the factors which are making the Indian manufacturing sector so resilient, and the growth pace, it still continues. So this we've seen how the sector is performing in case of India. So how credible is the PMI as an index in case of, to assess the performance of manufacturing sector in India? So it is seen as a significant measure of manufacturing, and it also measures the services sector as well. So the world over, this is the case, and it is like, it elaborates and it is frequent. So surveys purchasing managers in 500 manufacturing companies, so conducted monthly since March 2005, it tracks 5 major areas. So it tracks the new orders, the number of them they've been placed, the output, employment, suppliers, delivery time, and stock of items purchased. So it helps the analyst and economists to correctly anticipate the changing economic trends in GDP, employment, inflation, and industrial production. So what is driving India's strong shows? So the factory output is the highest in 18 months, and hiring has grown for the last 3 months continuously. So strong demand both within India and outside meant sharp improvements in the production, sourcing, and recruitment. So it is obviously, it is one of the most important factors. It depends upon the amount of demand, how basically the demand is shaping, how like for what all items the demand is increasing. But overall, we can see that the demand remains strong. So experts, they attribute this to the government spending as well. The role of the government's capital expenditure comes in, especially the capital expenditures is mentioned, and a strong rebound in the private consumption also. So we are seeing demand going up, and then capital expenditure by the public sector. That is keeping the India's manufacturing sector going forward very strong, and we continue with the momentum. So what does this actually mean for the Indian economy? So strong manufacturing, no doubt it is critical for India to post a high GDP growth. So surprisingly, the high clip of 6% in fourth quarter of the last fiscal came at the back of 4.5% growth in manufacturing, which had contracted in the earlier quarter. So high manufacturing PMI in the first 3 months of this financial indicates manufacturing rebound after a 1.3% contraction in the previous fiscal year. So how are other economies performing? So most large economies, they are struggling. China's June PMI was at 50.5. It was lower than their May's value of 50.9. So manufacturing business confidence, it's at 8-month low in case of China. So it is just, we can say it is barely able to touch the 50 level mark. And Eurozone, we saw that it was a 43, even in case of US. So they are basically seeing a fall. So even in UK, the contraction has worsened. So it's only the Indian economy which is performing fairly good when we compare it with the performance of other economies. So going by the quote of the day, as the Prime Minister Modi says, that some countries they use cross-border terrorism as an instrument of their policies and give shelter to terrorists. So SEO should not hesitate to criticize such countries, and there should be no room for double standards on such a serious issue. So it's all about SEO. We've already taken up this topic today. Coming to Financial Express. So here we see that the Q1 data, it is reflecting that India's key fiscal targets, we are on track to achieve them. So disinvestment shortfall to be offset by the extra rupees 60,000 crore non-tax receipts. So that's there. So budget assessment, when we have a look at the disinvestment receipts. So you need to be clear with what do we mean by strategic disinvestment, which is the body that we have, the department which looks into the matters of disinvestment. So disinvestment receipts, they are likely to fall short of the current financial year's target of rupees 51,000 crore. Dividend receipts, they could exceed the target by about rupees 60,000 crores, and ministry is told to advance the capital expenditures to achieve 10 trillion rupees spending aim that is there. So we are on track to achieve these targets. So RBI rejects 3 applications for setting up small financial banks. So that is it was basically from the Western Housing Finance for setting up their small finance banks. So you need to know about how these small finance banks are different from the scheduled commercial banks, how the functions different, and then what are the eligibility conditions in order to establish a small finance bank. So what is the role played by them in terms of financial inclusion? What are the different government schemes for that? So all of that becomes very important. So when we talk about the performance of rural economy, so we're seeing unemployment is at 2-year high of 8.73% in June, and the recovery has been subdued. The real wages, they shrink for 16th month. So that's like in continuity. So that is not posing a strong picture of the rural economy and its performance. So here we see when we're talking about the real wages, so you need to know about the basic difference between real wages and the nominal wages. So how do you basically calculate real wages is nominal wages minus the inflation rate. So in terms of real wages, that basically shows the actual situation on ground, and real wages you can understand in simple terms. It tells you about the amount of goods and services that you can actually buy through the wages that you are being paid, because it factors in the inflation thing. So that's why it is much more, we can say, truer in sense. So we have the data in the form of graph here. So it is showing the real rural wage growth. So you can see the wage growth, it has been in negative for the past 16 months. And this is for the HMCL sales volume. So even that is not positing that much a positive picture. So rural demand, definitely it is very, very important, and it's important to revive it back, to recover things back as far as the rural economy is concerned. So what steps can be taken, how capital expenditure that can be utilized in specific areas in order to revive the rural economy? So that's there. So high inflation, it has hurt the rural incomes, crimping the purchasing power. So right now also, since we are seeing that food inflation is on an upward trend, so even that will be having again a negative impact on the purchasing power of the people living in rural areas. We're focusing on the financial inclusion, so you need to know about the different schemes that have been announced by government in order to ensure that. And you also need to know what do you actually mean by financial inclusion, very simple terms. What is your idea of financial inclusion? So implementation of the plans in a time-bound manner is going to be the focus areas. So monitoring closely, the DPM and the corporate affairs secretaries, they share their updates with the finance minister, and she reviews the implementation of various announcements as it was done on the union budget. So she proposed setting up a national financial information registry to serve as the central repository of the financial and the ancillary information. So this is all about the SEO summit. This was already taken up, so you can just go through it quickly. What are the key takeaways from it? So Prime Minister takes on Beijing and Islamabad on their CPEC. Then the Hydra-headed monster of terrorism must be fought with full vigor, says the Pakistan's Prime Minister, and Z calls for efforts to safeguard regional peace. Regional security and stability is important. And Putin says the sanctions making Russia more stronger, and that is also visible also in the context of the impact that these sanctions they were like we can say that these sanctions were hardly successful in meeting their desirable outcomes. So Iran, it formally becomes the full member of SCO. Then RATS, you can see the regional anti-terrorist structure, which is a part of the SCO. It has played a significant role in basically countering the threat of regional terrorism. So we should also take proactive steps to prevent the spread of radicalization among the youth. So right now we are not having any plan to regulate the startups. So we are seeing that how the startup economy is booming in India, how the innovation sector that is emerging out, that is playing an important role. So even you can connect this topic with the women-led development, what and how women they can play a role in basically the startup revolution. So raise the annual startup funding to $1 trillion by 2030. So this is from the G20 group. So when we talk about satisfying our needs, so there's enough to satisfy our needs. So a Niti Aayog member says that green hydrogen is ideal for our needs. So India needs to promote green hydrogen large scale and work on reducing the cost of electrolyzers for an accelerated path to net zero. So in order to make it much more affordable, this needs to be pondered upon and we need to work upon basically bringing down the cost of its manufacturing. So World Meteorological Organization says that El Nino to be of moderate strength. So that is a good thing for the economies and specifically in the context of inflation. So it would not be having that major impact on, driving up inflation. So that's there. And apart from this, you can find out about WMO and functions that it has. So there's 90% probability of El Nino even continuing during the second half of 2023. So it's expected to be at least of moderate strength. So with the discounted Russian crude oil and the imports that India is basically dependent upon Russia for the crude oil imports. So Indian refiners, they were able to save $7 billion because of the availability of the Russian crude oil at discounted prices. So the war impact, so Indian refiners, they saved at least $7 billion in foreign exchange in the last 14 months. And the country depends on imports to meet over 85% of the oil needs. So we are importing 85% of crude oil to satisfy our needs. And out of that, we are depending upon around 40% as a share of Russian crude oil. So nano fertilizers. So we're seeing that drones, they are going to be used to spray the nano fertilizers. So to promote the usage of the nano urea and diammonium phosphate fertilizer, the cooperative IFCO, it is announced procurement of 2,500 drones to spray nano soil nutrients. With generative artificial intelligence set to drive changes in automotive sector. So you need to know about the diverse applications of generative AI. So here we're talking about just the automotive sector. So it will be shaping the automotive industry in times to come, as it is set to change how the automobiles they are manufactured and they're used. So the consulting firm says that the transformative power of generative AI, it will accelerate the making of driverless cars, and it would happen in half the time than expected previously. So it will be shaping the designing sector and manufacturing in future. So that's going to be the impact. Coming to Indian Express. So here we see Vice President says that any delay on the Uniform Civil Code is corrosive to our values. So this topic is in news, so you need to know about all the dimensions. So we've been discussing about it, the concerns of the tribal community about their customary traditions that they've been following since ages and which has been passed on from generation to generation. So they are at risk, and they've also planned several protests. So we need to obviously ensure that this exercise remains inclusive in nature and it is consensus based. And even with the command of the vice president, so this definitely becomes very important. The prime minister have also spoken about this. So that's an important area you need to know about. The basically Article 44 of the Constitution of DPSP talks about UCC. So you need to know about rather like all the DPSPs, the main areas which they focus upon. So he says that they are basically certain that these principles, they're fundamental in governance of the country. So it's duty of the state to basically ensure that the principles they are implemented. So India's digital economy, you need to know about how things they have evolved and the contribution of digital economy, how it has opened up new avenues for even the employment sector for creation of new jobs. So under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, India strengthened its technology leadership. US visit it will further unlock the opportunities across sectors, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and telecommunications. So here the area of the critical and emerging technologies that becomes important. So developing Web 3.0, ancillary technologies, building ecosystems for critical emerging technologies, and create the global digital innovation hub and digital public goods. So all of these are very important. You need to know about their example. What do we actually mean by these terms? You didn't know you can like search about what are the different features of Web 3.0. Basically it talks about decentralization, usage of the blockchain technology. Then you need to know about the digital public goods, their examples, and that's there. So we have this target of, or we have this vision of a $1 trillion of digital economy creation in India. So India still refuses to support the China's Belt and Road Initiative. So Shanghai Cooperation Organization's joint declaration that was there. So Putin raises the Wagner's mutiny, thanks the SEO leaders for their support. So this Wagner's mutiny, we've already taken up in this topic in detail. It's very, very important for us to have clarity about this. Then the Samarkand Declaration of 2022, which had said that Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan reaffirming their support for the China's BRI. They note the ongoing work to jointly implement this project, including the efforts to align the progress of the Eurasian Economic Union and BRI. So High Court says that RBI is within its power to withdraw rupees 2000 note. So let's understand this topic. So Delhi High Court has dismissed a BIL that challenged RBI's decision of announcing a withdrawal of rupees 2000 notes from circulation. So here definitely RBI enjoys the power to take such a decision. So earlier Supreme Court judgments have settled the scope of the judicial interference in matters relating to economic policy, and the bench, dismissing the plea, observed that the RBI is well within its power to issue the notification in question, which is only a part of the currency management system. So, on the petitioner's contention that a direction from the RBI not to reissue the banknotes can only be given for such notes which are torn, which are defaced, or which are excessively spoiled. So, the bench said the same is not applicable in the present case. So right now the update is that rupees 2000 nomination, it is still going to be a legal tender. So we are obviously waiting upon this thing that post September, whether this is going to be the same thing or not. So Mizoram CM says that can't keep quiet. Manipur situation is worsening day by day. So just we are very well aware about these things. How's the situation? What steps can be taken? What's the role of center in order to normalize the situation and bring back stability in Manipur? And we've already discussed the ethnic composition, the reasons behind the ethnic violence there. So basically, the rise of the swing states. So these states, they will be pivotal to the world economy and the balance of power. So when we talk about the SCO, the BRICS, the Goldman Sachs, the Global Investment Bank, that talked of dreaming with the BRICS 2 decades ago, has a new idea now. So it calls it the swing states that will shape the global balance of power. So it is talking about the BRICS economies, and the SEO. So it will shape the global balance of power. So BRICS and SEO, whose salience can only dim in the Indian strategy calculus, swing states, they are beginning to loom larger in Delhi's strategic priorities as well. So even if when we talk about the economic potential of these economies, which are a part of the BRICS and SU, obviously that's going to be very important in coming times. So SEO, it was formed in 2001, and the idea of BRICS was a simple one: to limit the American power in the unipolar moment of 1990. So that was a different time period. There was the challenges, they were different in today's context. Obviously, the challenges, they have been evolving, and we are facing new challenges. So how are we going to deal with them in terms of the importance of BRICS and SEO in order to counter those challenges? So Russians, who were looking for a way to reclaim their global position after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they found BRICS to be a useful platform to counter the West. So the Russia, India, China forum pushed by Moscow provided the scaffolding. So if the ambition of BRICS, it was global, the focus of SCO, it was regional to keep the US and its color revolutions out of the shared inner Asian periphery of Russia and China. So Shanghai 5, it was convened by Russia and China in 1996, along with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. So these were the 5 founding members of SCO. So it was formally set up in 2006, and the 4 initial members of the BRICS Forum, they welcomed South Africa into their ranks in 2010 to make it BRICS. So earlier it was BRIC, and it was founded in 2006, and then in 2010 South Africa also entered and became a part of BRICS. So right now both these bodies, they are debating the expansion of their memberships as the worldwide interest in them that is growing. So notwithstanding the ambitious plans for their expansion, SCO and BRICS, they are running out of their geopolitical steam as the context that brought them together at the turn of the millennium that no longer exists. So the reason for which they united back then, obviously the situation has changed in today's time. So that's why they are basically pondering upon the expansion. So the idea of swing states could endure because it is less ideological. So it is rooted in the structural condition of the international system, the emergence of several nations, big or small, with significant resources, capacities, or location to influence geopolitical outcomes. So the SCO's core objective, that was to counter the external threats from the US. Central Asia's rulers, they welcomed the protection Russia and China offered against the threat of regime change sponsored by the West. So after the Moscow's invasion of Ukraine and the Russian nationalists claim that many former Soviet republics, their artificial states, the source of external threat looks different in Central Asia now. So nor does the reason seek to trade the Russian hegemony for the Chinese dominance. So Central Asian states, instead, they are looking to diversify their international relations, including with US, Europe, Japan, Turkey, and India. So obviously they don't want to, be restricted to handful of countries and dependent upon them, because obviously then it would raise questions about their autonomy and independence as well. So the geopolitics of BRICS, that also looks different today. China, it is more powerful than its former peers. Beijing's GDP, it is bigger than all the other BRICS put together. Russia, it has locked itself into an expensive and unwinnable conflict with the West, even as its relative economic weight continues to decline. So as it bleeds from the Ukraine war, Moscow is now it is more dependent than ever before on China. So with this war, we are seeing one of the outcomes is that Russia it has become much more dependent upon China. So meanwhile, India's contradictions with China they have sharpened, while those with the US they are being smoothed over. So you can see one change even in this dynamics. So Delhi might have wanted a multipolar world in the 1990s, but its preference today is a multipolar Asia to stop the region from becoming China's backyard. Very, very important thing. So idea of swing states could endure because it is less ideological. So that's going to be an important emergent thing. So again, this is going to be an interesting topic. What I don't want India to be. So I don't want it to be a country where youth is traumatized and disillusioned. So every week I get a few requests to help with tailoring policies, awareness workshops, and forming or training the ICs from all kinds of organizations, including unstructured ones like the film production units, startups, and even art exhibitions and film festivals. So those who initially wanted to avoid implementing the workplace sexual harassment prevention law by insisting that they're not really a workplace, they are beginning to see the value in this work. So when you make organizations safe for women, you make them safer for everybody. So UK says that make India, Japan, Brazil, Germany as the UNSC's permanent members. So this is a topic related to UN reforms. Apart from this, there are certain more demands being raised as a part of reforms. So you can find out about that, but still we are not seeing any progress in terms of the UN reforms. So what is the state of science research in India? So why India? It is a large pool of science and engineering students. While we are having this advantage and it is involved in frontline research areas globally, it fares poorly on several key parameters, which the NRF has the potential to address. So we've been like focusing upon this because recently government has taken the decision to approve the formation of National Research Foundation, so it is being widely welcomed by the scientific community as well. So here we have the data when we compare with the other economies. So we'll just go by this the theory which says that expenditure on the R&D, so primary among these is the money that India spends on R&D. So for more decades, for more than 2 decades now, center's stated objective was it has been to allocate at least 2% of the national GDP on R&D. But not only has this objective not being met, but the expenditure on R&D as a proportion of GDP, it has gone down from about 0.8% at the start of this millennium to 0.65% now. So rather than increasing, it has rather gone down. So obviously the situation needs to be addressed. So we hope for the best in coming times now. So this does not mean that money for research, it has not increased, but the spending on research, it has more than tripled in the last 15 years. But India's GDP that has grown faster, and so the share of research, that's why it has gone down. So financially, when we look at the amount, so that has increased. Now, when we calculate that in terms of the percentage of GDP that is basically being spent on R&D, so that has gone down because the size of India's GDP that has increased. So that's why in terms of the GDP share, it has gone down. So at least 37 countries, they've spent more than 1% of their GDP on R&D in 2018. So one thing is obviously that we need to increase the percentage of GDP that we're spending on R&D. And with now the government focusing upon this sector, so obviously we expect and we hope for the best. So when we talk about the research in universities, so India has nearly 40,000 institutions of higher education, mostly colleges. More than 1,200 of these are full-fledged universities. Only 1% of these engage in active research. And a comparative number for other countries is not available, but it's common knowledge that in most leading countries, universities, they are the centers of research and development activities. So even in India, we need to create these universities as centers of research and development. Then when we talk about the research output, so we have produced around 25,000 doctorates in 2020, of which around 15,000 they were in science and engineering disciplines. So this 59% proportion, the overall doctorates compares well with other countries, putting India in the 7th rank overall. So even in absolute terms, also India's annual output of science and engineering doctorates is right at the top. But because India's large population, this is not impressive in proportional terms. So because again, population has been increasing, so that's why we can say the share again that is been declining. So the number of researchers per million population in India is 262, which is extremely low compared with even developing countries like Brazil, South Africa, and Mexico. So even we like in this case, we are behind the developing economies. So about 94% of the Indians who obtained a doctorate at US University, they did so in science and engineering disciplines, and secondly, only to China. And then we have the data about the publications and the patents which are filed. So in 2021, total of 61,000 patents, they were filed in India, making it the sixth largest in the world. But this was nowhere close to nearly 16 lakh patents filed in China and about 6 lakh in US. So in India, it was just 61,573. So here we got some interesting data, which you can obviously note it down. Then supermassive black holes, they show time dilation in early universe. So time is a slippery thing, as profound thinkers like physicist Albert Einstein and fictional time traveler Dr. Fu plainly understood. So they've explained time as wibbly wobbly in sci-fi series. So scientists, they made that point new on Monday in a study that used observations of a ferocious class of black holes called the quasars to demonstrate time dilation in early universe. So what are quasars? They are among the brightest objects in the universe. They were used as a clock in the study to measure the time in deep past. So they're tremendously active supermassive black holes, millions to billions of times more massive than sun. Usually they're residing at the centers of galaxies. Then Einstein's general theory of relativity, it's very important. It showed that time and space, they are intertwined and that the universe has been expanding outward in all directions since the Big Bang. So Gift Nifty, a cross-border initiative, it started trading from Monday, executing over 30,000 trades in a session. So rechristened Gift Nifty, which is and the Singapore Exchange SGX Nifty, they started trading from the Gift City in Gujarat, and they executed around 30,000 trades. So this is the first cross-border initiative in connecting India and Singapore capital markets. So what is the deal about between both the countries? So according to a 5-year contract between the two, business will largely be shared on 50-50 basis. So initially for the business generated by Singapore, it will get 75% of the revenue, while NSE, it will get the remaining 25%. And for any business which is generated by the International Financial Service Center, which is currently very little in volume, so NSE will keep 75% of the business. So ethnicity, religion, and shared history, the ties that bind the zoo of Manipur and Mizoram. So Mizoram Chief Minister's emotional appeal to restore peace in Manipur through a tweet came on the same day as the main opposition party in the state called for reunification of the Zo people in view of the continuing ethnic violence between the dominant Metis communities and the Kuki Zomi tribes in Manipur. So Zo ethnic brethren, so Manipur's Kuki Zomi peoples, who live primarily in the districts of Chandrachudpur, Parzal, and Kangpopi, they were scattered population in Chandel and this region. So they come under the larger umbrella of the Zo ethnic tribes, which is one of the largest of which was the Lushi of Mizoram. So that is the actual thing. So the Chin Hills or the Indo-Chin Hill Ranges, it's a thickly forested region with an elevation of 2,100 meters in northwestern Myanmar. So the hills, they are home to a large number of tribes that come under the Zo umbrella. So they include all tribes of the Chinkuki Mizo-ethnic group spread across Myanmar, India, and Bangladesh, along with many subtribes and their clans like Chin, Kuki, Mizo, Lushi, Zomi, Peti, Mar, Ralte. So these are different names. So the tribes, they are believed to have migrated from China through Tibet to settle in Myanmar and speak a group of Tibeto-Burman languages. So apart from their ethnicity and their religion, the tribes, they are knit together by Christianity, which is the Kuki Zomi of Manipur. They share the history, memories of the violent Mizo nationalist movement of the 1960s. So as the Indian forces, they cracked down, many of them, they fled from Mizoram to Manipur, where they have lived ever since. So the new reunification, so most displaced people who have arrived in Mizoram from the Manipur because of the recent incidents of the ethnic violence in the state, they are now in the districts of Aswal, Kolasib, and Sarchip. So barring a handful who are in the transit camps, they set up by the Mizoram government, the vast majority of them, they live with their Mizo relatives. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in the today's analysis session, and do subscribe to the channel if you haven't so far.